Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, June 23rd school committee meeting. I'm going to ask, we just returned from executive session. If those who are present could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so, as I said, we just came back from executive session. The first thing on our agenda tonight is the public forum for our assistant superintendent candidate. And I don't know, Dr. Kavanaugh, are you going to introduce or is Kim?
I think Kim will do
All right,
that.
come on up.
As our HR director, she's best equipped.
And it's wonderful to have you here, Kim.
Why, thank you. It's nice to be here. I'm so delighted to introduce you to our assistant superintendent finalist, Jeff LeBreau. He is a BC alum. He's got a degree in master's degree in educational leadership, another master's degree in curriculum and instruction, and his bachelor's degree was in elementary education and communication. We're very lucky to have him here tonight. He comes to us from Sudbury Public Schools, where he's currently the principal at Josiah Haynes Elementary School. Did I say that right? And he's here just to give everyone a chance to meet him, ask some questions, and learn a little bit more about him. So I hope you'll all join me in welcoming him. Would you like your seat?
Love it. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to the committee for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to join with you tonight. Dr. Kavanaugh, for the extension of this place in the search to fill this position, this really important position in Hopkinton.
It is an important position, so welcome. We are happy to have you here tonight. He's been through some rigorous trials already, and he has made it this far, which is very exciting. So I will start with the signature Hopkinton question. We always ask that, and then I will hand it over to you as a committee. So Jeff, our question is always, tell us a little bit about yourself, but why Hopkinton, why now?
Well, I will start with why Hopkinton, why now. Throughout my career as an educator, as a teacher, as an administrator, I've had the good privilege of working in a host of different settings. And one of those settings was a setting that was evolving quickly, that was changing quickly. It was a setting where the population was expanding exponentially. It was a setting where the demographics were shifting tremendously. And there's a lot of excitement around that. There's a lot of excitement watching a community evolve and grow, because when you watch a community evolve and grow, you get to see that community's core values front row center. You get to see how are you welcoming everyone in under the tent? How are you creating opportunities for every child to experience every good thing that they're entitled to as a birthright? I know that this committee believes that the value of public education cannot be enumerated, and part of being able to be part of that experience, assuring that a group of students, whether they be 5 years old, 15 years old, is getting the best opportunity available, is a really exciting thing for me. And so I know that Hopkinton is a community that is expanding, it is growing, it is changing. And the prospect of being able to be part of that experience is something that, both as a personal and professional challenge, as well as an opportunity, is something that I'm really excited by. A little bit about me. I'm a kid from Springfield. I showed up in kindergarten at 4 years old, and I decided that I wanted to be a teacher. And the next day, everyone also decided they wanted to be a teacher. Yeah. And then the day after that, everyone decided, well, now we all want to be firefighters. But I never changed my mind. I always wanted to stay a teacher, and I never changed my mind. In the entire time that I was in school, I had an amazing school experience, and I fell in love with school, every aspect of it. And so when I went off to school, I started as an elementary education major. I graduated as an elementary education major, had the good fortune of teaching 4th and 5th grade for a number of years. Started out as a substitute teacher, which I think everyone should do. And then had the good fortune of moving on to the Lexington Public Schools, where I was served as both an assistant principal and principal, and in my current role now as the proud principal at the Josiah Haynes Elementary School in Sudbury.
Thank you.
So obviously you are aware these are big issues that have been in Hopkinton in terms of both rapid growth and shifting demographics. Are there things that you feel like were done in the setting you were in before that you would want to see kind of bring to Hopkinton and that you feel were really vital to what made the success? Or the other side of that, were there things that you wish had been done that were not?
Well, I think that the work we're doing right now around equity in many of our school districts, I know Hopkinton is among those, is not only vital, but it's also timely and impactful. Yeah, I referenced earlier this idea that at the core of my work is making sure that everyone can come in under the tent. And I think that as a community evolves, as a community grows, that's something that we need to see. When I was working in Lexington over the course of 3 years, our English learner population in my building grew by 40% in a 3-year span. Now that's a pretty sizable growth. And what I'm most proud of with my leadership partners and in the district there was that we responded appropriately. Whether it be making sure that there was teaching space available, whether it was the training of teachers to make sure that they were certified, capable, and comfortable teaching students for whom English was a second language, or just making sure that there was the appropriate staffing in place. Making sure that students had that was incredibly important. And at the same time, making sure that that Tier 1 classroom instruction was incredibly robust and incredibly powerful. Students in the classroom are getting what they need when they need it, and not every student was getting the same thing all the time, and that's okay. Not only is it okay, it's what we want to see happen. But it's a big lift for our educators. It's asking a lot, but it's something that we can do.
Can I lead off of that a little bit?
Please.
So you're speaking about having worked in a district where you had a lot of demographic growth and possible cultural shifts and things like that. As that happens, how do you ensure that those families do feel like they're brought in under the tent? Like, what kind of strategies do you employ to ensure that they're being heard?
Well, I'll talk a little bit about the work I'm doing at present right now. So in my community in Sudbury, we are getting ready to open a 100+ unit housing complex right down the street from our school. And those students, the ones who are eligible for kindergarten to 5th grade, will almost certainly be attending Haynes School next year. And so right now we're already in the planning stage of what does that look like when these students come in. This is literally a brand new neighborhood that's opening right before our eyes that used to be just an open area. And it's now housing hundreds of people and many students coming to us. So when we think about how we're going to make those students and their families feel welcome, we think about what are we doing ahead of time. So is it making sure that there are specific elements in our school improvement plans that lay out actions A, B, and C that will allow our students to come in and feel welcomed? It's not just inviting parents to volunteer for our PTOs or parent organizations, but it's actively seeking them out. One of my favorite lines is from a book I read a long time ago about a long-departed politician. He might be a local guy. He may or may not have been Speaker of the House of Representatives at one point. And he tells the story about how he didn't get the vote of a neighbor who had lived on his street for a long, long time. And he asked the neighbor, why didn't you vote for me? We've known each other forever. And she said, you didn't ask. You didn't ask for my vote. And there's a lot of power in that personal outreach. And I think that while it's a lot of heavy lifting and it's a lot of legwork, it pays dividends because sometimes people need to be asked, especially those who might realize that, oh, I'm in a different spot of town than the cohort that's running this, or I look a little bit different than the co-chairs of this operation. Sometimes we have to be a little bit more proactive in making sure that, again, everyone comes in, because we know that when our parents are actively engaged, our students are going to do better.
So shifting gears a little bit to the
Sure.
role of the assistant superintendent and the curriculum aspect.
Sure.
So thinking about that, our district is very committed to the whole child education. And we also in our strategic plan have a commitment to individual paths, individual learning paths, voice of choice for students. So I'm curious about your thoughts about balancing the district's initiative to really educate the whole child and sometimes the student's goal to do more of what they excel at, or maybe not pursue things that are more challenging. So how do you approach that? What are your thoughts on that? And whether it's supporting students in areas where they need support or stretching them in areas that they excel in. You know, if they're at the top and they're advanced, how do you push them and still do the whole child?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. All of your questions have been great. I don't want to play favorites. All great. But to your question about, I think we start at the end. You know, as a pre-K to 12 district, our ultimate goal is to create citizens who can contribute actively to society. And so as I think about the students that we want to graduate from our high school, or beyond, or prior to that if they're going to go advance elsewhere, we're thinking about how are you going to be an active contributor to society? How are you going to be able to sustain the support of you and your family? How are you going to do something that you love, that hopefully you're good at, and something that the world needs you to do? So backing that up, we need to think carefully about what it is. What are the core elements of what our students need? What do we know that every student needs? We know that every student needs to know how to read, write, complete mathematics, not just arithmetic and calculating, but be mathematical thinkers, and we want them to be able to reason. Beyond that, and probably in front of that, our students need to know how to take care of each other. For me, that's the biggest thing right now, is do our students understand what it means to be a member of our community and a member of our society? Are they someone who someone else could lean on? Are they someone who someone else could trust? If we can create an atmosphere in which our students want to learn, want to excel, but before all that want to make sure that those around them are able to do the same, then we've done our job. And that comes a lot through SEL, whether it be explicit direct instruction on pro-social skills, or it's embedded throughout the day. For instance, in math, in a fourth grade classroom, we're prioritizing making sure that students are playing games or they're working with partners. Sometimes the partners aren't chosen by the students, and sometimes we're navigating some of those interpersonal skills. That's where that SEL can come to pass and be really strong. But at the same time, we need to make sure that each of our students is getting what they need when they need it. And like I said earlier, that means that not every student's going to get the same thing every day. And our job, and I truly believe that should I be so lucky to have it, my job as the overseer and supporter of curriculum and instruction is to make sure that our building leaders and our educators have those tools so that they can support that.
Thank you.
Can I piggyback on that question? In terms of technology, Hopkinton has been a one-to-one district for a while and is kind of a model for a lot of area districts.
Mm-hmm.
But along the lines of what you just said, SEL, being a person that you can trust and rely on, and those things get tricky, especially now after having spent a lot of time on technology for the last 2 years. So can you speak a little bit about sort of your philosophy around that and how you think you might frame that within the umbrella of curriculum and instruction?
Absolutely, and I think that our time in remote and hybrid learning accelerated that for everyone, because all of a sudden what used to be a nice to have was now a necessity. And I think for our educators too, those who said, oh, I think I can figure this out, or I'm not going to touch that. There's not an educator out there who doesn't know how to hold a Google Meet or doesn't know how to use Google Classroom or any of those platforms to support their students' learning. There's no putting the genie back in the bottle about technology. And so we need to make sure that it is used when it's the best tool. Mindful that, and some of the best advice I have gotten from instructional technology specialists I've been able to work with has been, sometimes, Jeff, the best tool to use is a pencil. And don't be afraid to do that when it's the best tool. Don't feel the need to create some crazy online experience or digital interface when sitting and playing a game at a table is the most productive thing. But our students need to know how to get into the world armed with those tools. I think about when I was in high school and I was a sophomore and we had a brand new computer lab and I learned how to use Microsoft Word. I was very excited about that, possibly very distracted about some of the word art that I wasn't supposed to be spending so much time designing.
Of course.
But that was a really important thing. And now I think that there are, none of our students are walking the halls of our schools having lived in an era where they didn't have ready access to that. I think about my 4-year-old nephew who can, into a room, ask Google, and he does. Sometimes you have to turn off the microphone because he keeps asking, hey Google, what is X, Y, or Z? That was stuff of science fiction a decade ago, and that's the world in which we're living. How many of our teachers in high school tell us you're not always going to walk around with a calculator in your pocket? Well, okay. Show them. So I just think that we need to be mindful of it, and the responsibility piece needs to be huge because, and that's a partnership between our educators, our administrators, our students, and their parents to say that this is something we all have to try to get on the same page about. We have to put the right number of limits in place, but also we need to build capacity for students to be able to make the right decisions.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I loved, I was lucky enough to visit your school on Friday, and I was very impressed with the focus on SEL and incorporating it into the kids' day all day long. My background is a social worker and a behavioral health person, so I'm very interested in, we're on the precipice, or maybe we're just right there with a pediatric mental health crisis, right? We are lacking access outside of the schools to counselors. Insurance is often unable to cover kids, so we often have to have our teachers play double duty if we don't have the appropriate resources within our schools or in the community that are accessible. How do you think that we should manage that going forward as we have these children that are grieving or are differently experiencing socioeconomic, home life, or socio-political strife, and all of these things that are happening that are making our kids a little bit more anxious, depressed,
Right.
raising suicidal ideation, particularly in the older grades, like the middle school, high school grades.
Well, you raise a number of good points there, and I agree with what you're saying. And whether or not we're looking at regional data about our pre-adolescent or adolescent students, or we're looking at national trends, we know that we have an issue, and that we need to be working toward it. One of the great ways that we can build capacity for our educators is through either embedded or external professional development and learning. Now, the tricky part with that is there are only so many resources in which we can do that. There's only so many hours in the day, weeks in the year, and dollars in the fund to be able to support what we want to do with professional learning. And that's why I think part of how we lean on that is through our strategic plan. So we have a strategic plan in Hopkinton right now that prioritizes mental health among 2 other main areas. So when we make plans for what we're going to either offer for professional learning for our staff, whether it be our administrators, our teachers, our cafeteria crew, who can either be able to spot the signs of concern or be able to proactively support them. I think that's a great way that we can leverage it. And there are so many resources out there. One of the things that I am quick when someone says, well, what do you do as an administrator? People know what you did as a teacher. What do you do as an administrator? Besides the 4-hour nap in the middle of the day. No one, about the nap, right? What we do is we draw connections. So what is the way we can connect resource A to resource B? And there are so many out there. So one of the things that I'm excited about at the prospect of joining this administrative team and the educators here in Hopkinton is being able to be one of those conduits to connect, whether it be a counterpart directing student services or in partnership with Dr. Kavanaugh, or asking Ms. Rothermich for more money. How can we best get that information out in front? How can we, with our strategic plan, decide that this is the most important thing, which in Hopkinton we've already done, and then say how are we going to best leverage those resources so that our staff can be armed to support those students. But at the end of the day, what you said at the top is the most important. We have to all agree that there's a problem and we need to work to fix it and support it.
Thank you.
A question that we had from the community, that a community member who was not able to be here and had asked that we ask on her behalf, is there have been in Hopkinton, we have like many area schools, a significant number of families and children who, their kids are advanced or a little bit above grade level.
Sure.
How do you see in the school role being able to support their unique needs for advanced learners, whether they're a little above grade level or kind of differentiating in
Yeah.
that?
Well, I know I keep going back to professional development for our staff, but I truly believe in it, especially when it's proximate, especially when it's timely, especially when it is something that a teacher can take in an afternoon workshop and implement something from the next day in the classroom. That is where we get the most bang for our buck, is when we think about tier one or universal access, universal design in our classrooms. So that might mean that in a first grade classroom, we are having different students do different things. And sometimes those students are working together. And sometimes when they're working together, they're doing it homogeneously. Other times they're doing it in mixed groups. Students are able to learn from one another and work together, again, embedding that SEL again. But our teachers are working really hard and should be working really hard, and surely they are, to make sure that all of our students are getting what they need when they need it. And then we add in some layers of support there, whether it be academic specialists or academic coaches, who are not necessarily pulling a student out of the classroom to do something different, but rather working with a general education teacher or a special education teacher on how they can differentiate what's going on in the classroom. And then, of course, once we get to the secondary level, having looked through the Hopkinton High School and middle school courses of study, we see that there are a lot of opportunities for students to take those different pathways and to challenge themselves in different ways. And as teachers, as counselors, administrators, one of our roles is going to be to make sure that we're supporting those students to be able to make those decisions so that they are right for themselves and for their family, but they keep them engaged. I had been asked a question earlier on in this process about, what makes good teaching, and I say that admittedly, the oldest students I ever taught are fifth graders, but good teaching is good teaching, and when you walk into a classroom, if students are engaged, then you know you have something good going on. That's the measure. Now there's a lot more to it. It's not just that, but if you can get that baseline that students are engaged, you know you're doing the right thing. So in answer to that question, there's a lot to do. There's a lot of discussion and debate around acceleration versus going deeper into content. And I'm a little bit more of a practitioner of the latter, thinking, all right, how deep can we get into this, or what element of that piece do you not fully own yet that we could possibly get you to own? That maybe it's not something we need you to do to move to the next level, but it sure will make you a deeper thinker and make your learning richer.
So I guess piggybacking on that a little bit, I'm a data person.
Great.
Okay, so when we're talking about, accelerated learners or learners that need special supports, how do you go about verifying to make sure that each of those students is making a year's worth of progress every year, as opposed to, maybe as you were saying, if a student knows something, maybe going deeper might not move the needle very much for that student, right? So how do you do that verification, make sure that students are actually progressing?
Yeah, I think we have to have a robust system of benchmarking that starts with baseline assessment data and allows us to look throughout the year at what the data is telling us. Now, data can sometimes, especially in education circles, not always be looked upon as the kindest of words. But a woman that I have learned so much from over the years said, Jeff, if you just flip the word data to the word evidence, all of a sudden you've opened the conversation. So what is the evidence that the student has made progress? And that evidence can come in a myriad of ways. It can be through a data sample, it can be through a standardized assessment, it can be through a local assessment. If you're using a particular, say, math program that has some benchmarking tools, you're using those. A lot of it too is teacher observation and anecdotal data. At the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to be able to triangulate what we're looking at. So a student's allowed to have a bad day on a test. A student's allowed to have a bad day participating in class. That's human nature, and we sure hope that everyone gives us in our lives that accommodation as well. But what's most important is that we can say, over time, what does the triangulation of a few different data points tell us? Or what does the trend line through tell us of progress over time? And I think that having those pieces in place is incredibly important. You think about the work that is happening across the state right now with our dyslexia regulations and how we're assuring that our students are not, we're not overlooking or not seeing a component of what their progress is. So whether or not we're looking at phonemic awareness or their ability to comprehend, just to take early literacy as an example, we want to make sure that we can do that. And then we look maybe again at, let's say, the humanities. Let's look at social studies. Can a student take a multiple choice test about the history of a certain war? Okay. Can they explain to you 4 months later what the significance of that war was? There's a few different points that we can use there, and it all stems back to what is the thing we want? What is the thing we're looking for with this student?
Thank you. I can ask another question.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Don't feel compelled.
No, no. We could talk all night. This is great. It's very interesting, and thank you for your willingness to come and talk to us. But talking about Hopkinton, just our district challenges. We are a district with many 2-grade schools, a lot of transitions.
Yeah.
And I think part of the role of the assistant superintendent, from a curriculum lens and so forth, is to help to smooth that from the experience of the student perspective. So can you speak a little bit about how you can help work with the administration to make it a smooth K to 12 to post 12, 22, in some cases, experience that's cohesive
Sure.
for our students?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, every schooling model, and we know that, you look at a district and you look at the district next door, and everyone's going to have something that looks a little bit different. There are benefits and there are challenges to every cohorting model that you use. The benefits of what we have in place right now in Hopkinton is that there's never a limit to being able to maximize working with your job-alike and grade-alike colleagues to maximize the expertise around a certain grade area, if I'm talking just about the elementary level. And of course, the challenge is that vertical alignment, that it's hard to talk to the grade up if the grade up is not down the hall but down the street. That's a challenge. So we need to make sure that we find time for that. Again, there's only 180 days in the school year, so that easier said than done. But as a priority, if we do find that transition is something that either is lacking or something that we have an opportunity to sustain or strengthen, then that's something that we definitely want to make sure that we find time to do. It might be as easy as staff development opportunities where staff are working in mixed groups. So a 3rd grade teacher is working with a 4th grade teacher, and they're mixed up and they don't normally get to talk, but all of a sudden they're having conversations. Oh, this is what it looks like here. Oh, this is what we're doing. So you either will get some congruency of what's happening or just a little bit of thinking to walk away. So that's what my class is walking into next year. Or, oh, that was the experience my class had the year before. That gives a lot of insight. But that's just cursory stuff there. As we're thinking about curriculum models, whether it be programs or homegrown or commercial, the fidelity with which we implement those and stick with those helps our students know that I'm not relearning. I might be learning a different concept or content as the years go on, but I'm not learning a different approach to. And that can be a good thing.
We are running short on time. Does anyone have any last?
No, it's been great meeting you. Go ahead,
Yeah, no, so just thank you so much for coming in. You've certainly provided us a lot of a depth of information. I know too, our the site team and the interviews ahead had a lot of information too. So thank you.
Absolutely. I just have to say it was a pleasure, Ms. Marin, having you and the rest of your team with us. I know Dr. Kavanaugh, you were there as well. Getting to welcome you to my school and getting to share with you the work that we've been doing and the great benefit that I have had in working with some amazing educational and leadership colleagues who've definitely strengthened me along the way. I would be lying to you if I didn't say that I was beyond ecstatic about the prospect of joining the Hopkinton Public Schools.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
so
very
much.
much.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you for being
Thank you.
here.
I'll be in touch.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Kim.
Is Sudbury done? Are you going to work tomorrow?
We are, I'm going to work, but we are done. Yes. All right, thank you.
Different type of
All
work.
right.
Thank you all.
Bye. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. So that brings us back into our regular business. We do have an opportunity for public comment. I don't know Any public and hiding in the corners? Otherwise, do we have recognitions tonight?
I suppose we should just recognize all of the students, all of the faculty, staff, everyone in our community, administrators, administrative assistants, for a year well done. It was a very, very hard year, and we made it, so,
Yeah.
yes.
Yay,
Yeah.
congratulations.
It was pretty
to
great,
all of you.
seriously,
Oh
yes.
my gosh, yes.
All right, then that moves us into reports, and we get to start with the financial report. This is always a big one.
Are you using the screen?
I'm going to see if I can jump on the screen.
Okay.
I had to change my Wi-Fi. If you go on the other Wi-Fi, the TV doesn't show up.
Oh.
Interesting. There, yes, thank you.
At the end.
Okay, so, just to run through this and, make it a little bigger.
Yeah, I think if you hit the green dot at the upper left, you'll get it even bigger.
Going off the screen there. Okay. So I just wanted to run through where we are at this point in time. So the financial report that is part of the packet indicates approximately an $80,000 positive variance. What has happened over the last 2 years, the buildings and the departments have shifted their spending to meet the needs of where the students in the district are as of now. There was really a focus on improving the student learning environment, increasing access to technology, and acquiring curriculum materials to enhance the changes in teaching and learning that has been ongoing. So the financial report summary page indicates a positive variance in central office, student services, athletics, and occupational day, and those are offset by a negative variance in technology, regular education, and building and grounds. So the positive variances in central office student services was mostly due to transportation issues. As you know, 3 bus runs were eliminated in March, and this was because we did not have drivers. Except Collaborative was unable to provide in-district transportation for students on IEPs all year, and that has been brought up several times throughout the year. Athletics had games canceled due to COVID and lack of transportation, and also freshman field hockey, softball, girls basketball, and the middle school softball teams did not run, and that was due to low numbers. Occupational day students that had initially intended to go to Norfolk Agricultural and we had budgeted for them decided to stay in Hopkinton. So as the positive variances became apparent during the year, the buildings and the departments discussed opportunities to better address student needs as we exit the pandemic. For technology, additional computers were purchased for staff to improve access. There were additions to the loaner pool, and we had to buy more for the increased need at the preschool level to stay with the students. In regular education, several curriculum decisions were made to enhance the changes in teaching and learning. There was an increase in the number and diversity of texts. Classroom libraries were created, professional development in writing and literacy, and increased hands-on example opportunities are just a few examples. Equipment for the curriculum was also purchased, and the learning environments and student circulation in the auditorium, library, and classrooms were improved with furniture. In building and grounds, strategies also were looked at to enhance the learning environment. Flooring and paint is budgeted in some areas, however, that was expanded to contiguous spaces and targeted areas. A controls project was initiated, which we discussed earlier in the year, to enhance energy conservation and classroom comfort. And equipment that was identified in the preventive maintenance work was replaced again instead of repaired due to age. So the decisions made for this budget year will enhance the learning environment and place the school department in a strong position going forward. The end of year balance will still vary slightly as the buildings continue to examine their open purchase orders and final extra pay assignments flow through to payroll. And just as a reminder, any positive variance will revert back to the town when the fiscal year closes. And this amount will be available as free cash in the next budget cycle. So that's kind of a summary of all the pages that are behind it. Are there any questions on any of the details or anything else?
I had a couple of questions, actually, more for Dr. Kavanaugh. You may not know, but do we have any idea with 4 teams at the young girl age, like where our girls are going if they're not playing softball? And it surprised me that it's 3 freshman teams and an 8th grade team. Have there been more other activities, do we know, or is it just
I don't know the answer to
or
that. I
lack
would
of
have to check on that.
transportation or anything? I'm just curious. It seems
Yeah.
like a lot all of a sudden to have 4 different teams. I don't know if they're doing robotics or who knows.
Right.
You know, we're diversifying.
Well,
but-
the robotics group is huge.
right.
Yes.
Yeah, it'd be
I can check
interesting
on
to
that.
know. Yeah, more about that. On the financials, I noticed. I see that Mr. Person is here. We're saving in the buildings and grounds for summer help, it looks like.
We have not hired summer help, starting from the pandemic. We just have not brought in, summer help. And it is also very difficult to get subs, but once the pandemic started, we did not hire summer help and we have not restarted that.
But we're okay with without.
With
Without
current
it.
staffing, we're able to handle our summer help, or our summer workload, if you will.
My only one other question about the transportation. I know we had to take 3 routes out. Was not anything we wanted to do. Has that experience this year changed one way or another our perspective on busing needs for next year? You know, having lived without 3, do we have a sense of what optimal is in a world where we could actually get all the drivers we want? Or
Well, we've joined with Connolly in advertising for drivers, and we've actually, through our advertisement, have been able to send forward 2 applicants. So we have been able to help them to hire. If you remember, for the next budget year, we actually did add an additional bus. When you look at the numbers, there are still areas of town that are growing. And so the need for many buses in specific areas, they could have 2 stops and be full. So, one bus run could literally be done in 10 minutes, but there's 70 kids. So what we did learn is, as the year goes on, kids continue to come, as you know, in enrollment. So you do need to leave room on each bus for that growth, so that you're not trying not to shift kids in the middle of the year. That's not ideal. So with planning for that next bus, we hope to leave, that margin for kids to move in and not have it be disruptive. Collapsing buses is not easy. I think as parents continue to kind of get their mindset around the pandemic may be done, they may put more and more of their kids on the bus.
Yeah.
So that growth could continue even for kids that exist in the district.
thank you.
My other understanding, of piggyback off of Amanda, is that some of the collapsing resulted in a little bit longer time on the bus, which
It
then
did.
resulted in some parents removing their child from the bus because are we expecting that, when you say we have one more, my recollection, although it's a little hazy, was that it's the 1 plus the ones that we collapsed, so that we'll be back.
We'll be back, right.
Right.
So
And-
the intention is to be back to our full, so keep in mind that we did have some bus runs that filled up very quickly.
Right.
And so those bus runs were short.
Yep.
And if we moved people around and then that bus run that was short became longer, they weren't having a longer run than what some of the other routes already had.
Sure.
So in terms of equity, it was still equity across the board. It just was not what they were used to for the majority of the year, and that's fair.
So I have a capital question. So there's two projects here that, I mean, I know why the other ones are in progress. There's two that are here in progress from this year that I just wanted to know, like, when are we foreseeing them being finished? The boiler replacement and the HVAC renewal and DDC controls?
So the boiler replacement, they are in progress right now, literally ripping out the boilers, decommissioning. So that's happening, and I think substantial completion is August, early August.
I think we're still waiting on a schedule, maybe even sooner. So they got all the equipment into their shop. They'll set up the rigging to get going. We were just kind of waiting for the end of school before we started ripping things up.
Okay, that makes total sense.
And the HVAC renewal and the DDC controls are installed. We're actually waiting for their as-built, so that we have those.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
On the capital, just to piggyback on the capital, our $80,000 for the campus study, I know it was approved originally, I think now 2 years ago. So do we have appropriations committee approval to retain that?
Yes.
And do we have a plan for spending it? Are we thinking that we're going to contract separately from the Elmwood project, or fold that in for additional funds for people already working with the Elmwood project? I know we're kind of bringing them together. What's our plan
So
to do
the
that?
intent is the designer that we hire, so just to refresh everybody, for the Elmwood project, we will be going to the MSBA on July 19th in front of the design and selection panel to choose a designer. Then we'll have interviews potentially a few weeks after that, with the hope to go into contract negotiations with our designer in August. That feasibility study that designer will then do will take us right through probably December of '23. Part of that work that we will add on is to look at the impact of other schools in what would be needed. And that's where that $80,000 of additional funding will pay for what is above and beyond what the MSBA directive is for a feasibility study. So it'll be one designer, one contract with two funding sources.
Perfect, thank you.
Oh, that was a good question.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Then, do we want to go into the superintendent's report? Oh, I like that photo.
Let's see if it will actually go into this. Oh, it did today. That's wonderful. All right, well, thank you. This is the superintendent's report for Thursday, June 23rd, 2022. I am hoping that this is our last COVID report ever. As I was putting them into the DESI portal yesterday, I thought, I'll just include them because sometimes we ask. But the numbers are way down. You can see that we had 9 cases, I think. At Marathon, staff and student, Elmwood 1 staff, Hopkins 1 student, the middle school 2 staffs, 2 students, and high school 1 student. We have some numbers coming out of the Hopkinton High School Guidance Department, the class of 2022 end of year reporting. So you can just see what the plans are for the graduates in the class of 2022. 91%, or 267 students, are going off to 4-year colleges. 7 students, or 2.4%, will be going to 2-year colleges. Then we had 7 students who reported that they would be taking a gap year and then going to college, and that equates to 2.4% of the class. 6 students, or 2% of the class, will be going into full-time employment. This year, unusually, there's not a single student going to military service. 3 of our international students are going to be returning home to whatever country they came from, which constitutes 1% of the class. And 3 students in the graduating class of 2022 will go on to our 18 to 22 Excel program, which is 1%. So in the entire graduating class, there were 293 students. The total going to college is 274, or 93.5%. And the total going on to further education is 277 students, or 94.5%. Right, just in terms of SAT scores, These are mean scores for the class of 2022, and they were calculated by using each graduate's highest evidence-based reading and writing score and their highest math score, because you will have students who will take the test multiple times. The asterisk at the bottom indicates that a lot of colleges this year opted to go test optional, and they did because I think that there were kids who were probably not planning to take the SATs or the ACTs just for COVID reasons. And so our numbers are significantly lower, I think, this year, just in percentages in terms of the numbers of kids who are taking the SAT or the ACT. Oops, make that stop. It happens all the time. Okay, so the mean score for the evidence-based reading and writing score on the SAT was 649 and 662 in the math, and 66% of the kids took the SAT. The mean score for the ACT was 30.7, and that's the composite score, and only 12% of the class of 2022 took the ACTs. Just a little bit of information about the National Merit Scholar results. So you know the PSAT is the qualifying test for that. We had 21 commended students and 2 finalists, which is 7.8% of the class, and that's really wonderful. It's really nice that we have that many students who are being recognized through the National Merit Scholar Program. Students going to public colleges or universities, 44.7% of the class, and 15.7% of them will be attending a Massachusetts public college or university. And so that is the information that I have right now.
So one quick question.
Yeah?
Just for the parents out there who don't have kids in high school necessarily. The 649 and the 662, those are above like norm means, right? For the SAT.
The 649 and 662, yes. Absolutely, you know,
Those
above sort of the average nationwide, or even I think the average in Massachusetts for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's probably a bit of a self-selecting group, though, because a lot of kids opted not to take the test, probably
Yes.
because of text to optional, so probably a higher percentage of.
No, agreed, but it's still 66% of the class. Right? So,
What is typical? Do we know? Do we have like last year's data?
Oh, I could ask Lee for last year's data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's
Or maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah,
Maybe not
2 years
last
ago.
year,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
last year's probably not.
Let's forget last year.
Yeah,
happened.
never mind that. Yeah, exactly.
I think what would be very interesting to look at is, 5 years ago or 10 years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
Because I think so many more colleges now are accepting applicants without submitting
Yeah.
SAT scores or ACT scores, that I think those numbers have dropped somewhat significantly for the College Board.
Do you have AP exam information?
Not yet. No, it has not come out yet. Okay, so I know people wanted to see an update on the bullying report, which we made last time we were together. So on June 9th, when we were together, these were the numbers that you saw. So Marathon had 2 reports, one with a finding, one with no finding. Elmwood had 3 reports, one with a finding, one with no finding, and 1 pending. So you'll see how that played out in the next grid. Hopkins was at 4 reports, the middle school at 5, and the middle school, high school combined, because it was a bus situation, had 1 report, and the high school didn't have any reports at all. So that means that in the last 2 weeks, over a 14-day period, I have highlighted for you in yellow where the changes are. So we're at Elmwood, we had 3 reports. We still have 3 reports. One of them is still a finding, but the one that was pending has resulted in no findings. So we now have 2 no findings and 1 finding at Elmwood School. At Hopkins, the 4 reports went up to 6 reports. We did have 2 bullying reports filed, I think, on the day of the school committee meeting or just the day before. And so that didn't even appear in there because we had no results. So of those 2 new reports, both of them resulted in findings. So at the end of the year, Hopkins had 6 reports, 4 findings, 2 no findings. The middle school had 5 reports. Now they are at 7 reports. And they used to have 2 findings and 3 no findings. Now they have 3 findings and 4 no findings. And then finally at the high school, 2 reports were filed. 1 resulted in a finding and 1 resulted in no finding. So that pretty much gets us to the closeout of the school year. And I know that there's a lot of talk about where we are with filling administrator positions. It's no secret that we have to fill our assistant superintendent role. So you met our finalists tonight. We're filling the HMS principal position. So at the middle school, we started with 5 candidates, and we had a round of interviews that involved teachers and the association president who's in the middle school, the executive assistant, Lauren McBride from the middle school. I was there, Kim Polnick was there, our director of social emotional learning, and we had 5 candidates, one of whom took a job somewhere else. So on interview day, we interviewed 4. Today we had, and after that round of interviews, we were bringing back 2 candidates. And so we had 2 candidates interview with us this afternoon, and that was entirely central office. Tomorrow, those same 2 candidates are going to present to the middle school faculty via Zoom. And so any middle school teacher who would like to be able to have a conversation with the candidates, that would be fabulous tomorrow afternoon. So that will be from 3 to 3:30 and from 3:30 to 4. Zoom link information will be sent to middle school faculty and staff in the morning. We have not invited anyone in yet for an assistant principal role at the middle school because we are thinking that you'd want to get your principal on board before you hire an assistant principal. Mrs. Carver, I can assure you, is working assiduously on filling the Elmwood assistant principal job. And we were there the other day, and I don't think that she's in any of the finalist places yet, so she's still working on that. And for the athletic director, at this point in time, Mr. Bishop and I are talking about using an interim internal candidate, but we're still thinking along those lines. So that's at least an update, so you have a sense of how those things are going. I know that with the middle school principal, it may feel very rushed, but we are sort of up against a deadline, because the moment you bring that person sort of on board, now they probably are leaving a district and have to give that district some notice that they're leaving. And we also want to get that person here so that we can start hiring an assistant principal and working on some of the things that principals do all summer long. So the work is big and the timing is really unfortunate. And so we're trying to get as much done as we possibly can in as much time as we can.
So one question I have is, in terms of the slate of candidates for HMS principal when they came in,
Yes.
how diverse was the slate of candidates?
I do not think that, oh, no, that might be, I don't know that there was a single candidate of a diverse background in the whole batch of applicants. I can go back and look.
Okay.
Yeah, but I do know that for assistant principal, there are several.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask procedurally, when we have an opening, like the middle school principal, how long do we leave the posting open typically? Is there a sort of an HR guideline or a norm or a mandate for how long a posting stays open before we begin interviews?
I think this one was open for a couple weeks before we started to call people for interviews. And I think a lot of that does, in fact, it's sort of predicated by, sort of how much time you have. But I think parties who are genuinely interested in the role will apply immediately. I don't think people sit there and say, well, maybe I'll apply to that Hopkinton job and maybe I won't. And then 3 weeks later, they go to look and the posting is closed. Lots of times you will also post a closing date on there. So that just makes it easy for people to understand. This is a very tricky hire, because sometimes with principal candidates, you'd love to be able to go and do a site visit, but there's no opportunity now, because the only thing that you would see if you went to their school are, furniture in the hallway and people waxing floors. So, it's a tricky time of year, but I think we are down to 2 candidates, and I think that they're good candidates.
And Dr. Cabinet, even though it's tricky, is it typical? I mean, it's sort of the close of a school year, ramping up for the other. I mean, maybe not for principal jobs, maybe for teacher jobs, but does it feel like a fairly typical transition time, or not so much?
Well, I think it's pretty typical for people to, especially with administrators, they typically have contracts that will run from July 1 to June 30th. Right. So very typically, there's sort of a seamless departure from one district on June 30th, much like what Mrs. Parson is doing right now. On June 30th, she'll leave us and she'll go to the next one. But the way her interview cycle worked is that she was, hired in a timely manner. Right. We are in a situation where, Mr. Keller gave us his notice, and I mean, to no fault of his, it's just the timing of his hiring process. So it does feel a little rushed right now.
Okay.
but I also think there's, I don't know if I want to use the word a danger, but there's something to be lost if you leave that position open, I think, during the summertime when a lot of work needs to be done.
Definitely.
All right, I'll just do a couple of really good stuffs. On Friday night, June 10th, we had a very small group of people who turned up to see I'm Not Racist, Am I? But I think that the film was eye-opening for the people who were there. And afterward, we got to talk with the director of the film, which was pretty amazing, the producer of the film. Yeah. Jen Parson and I joined Doug Scott at MIT, where several Hopkinton public school students were being honored for some of the products that they had done. These are all kids who have earned patents along the way, and this is just a picture of that. And this is Gerline Carr, who was graduated from Hopkinton High School this year. Just one happy look. This is yesterday, actually, at the Elmwood School, and you can see those kids are still hard at work, even on the next to last day. But it was really nice to see them all. I think for me, it was really nice to see them sitting in that circle because we have been through so many trials and tribulations of masking and no masking and 14 days and 10 days and 5 days and, you know, rapid antigen tests. But here's a whole group of kids sort of sitting elbow to elbow. It felt like old times. So
I almost hate to ask this with Mr. Person here, but will there be a return of like the tables and the
There will, yeah.
all those tables? And,
We're happy to bring all the teachers, all of the stuff they lost back.
you're very kind and patient.
And that's all I have for you.
Great. Any questions?
I think it's impressive that you have 2 finalists for the HMS principal position. Like, I was expecting you to say we're starting the process, and you're like, no, we have 2 finalists.
Oh, yeah.
That seems, that's impressive. I think that's really impressive.
All we do is read resumes and attend interviews.
I mean, I was thinking about these super important positions that need to be filled, and like, it's really amazing that we have a finalist for assistant superintendent, and we have finalists for, or we have 2 candidates that we're considering
Yes.
for.
And I really do feel confident that we have good people.
Yeah,
So
That's great.
I mean, I don't doubt that.
Yeah.
That's all I've met here.
I'm very pleased. So thank you.
Okay, that brings us then into the school committee chair report. Just to say that payroll warrant S22026 has been approved. Operating warrants number 22055 and 22056 have been approved, and they are all in your packet. Are there liaison reports that people have?
I don't have one.
I got to meet the turf group, and they did not want to make me chair because I do not know enough about turf. So, and I don't have a lot of information because it seems like there's a lot of transition over there too, like a lot of things up in the air. But I'm interested in everything. They're all like great people, so I'm happy to be there.
Great. Okay. That brings us then down into new business item A, which is the Apple equipment lease.
Thank you. So I could, I'm not sure that this is necessary to throw up on the screen, but each year with the one-to-one program, we do get a new lease for the MacBooks for the 9th graders. And again, I will make this nice and big. So that is so we use the PEPPM Technology Cooperative Purchasing Program, and that was used to get both the equipment and the lease through Apple Education. The student cost for the laptops is $1,097 that will be paid throughout their high school career. So the annual lease payments are $44,169.75, and again, funding for the lease will come from the participant payments into the one-to-one laptop revolving account for the students and families. So I am looking for the school committee to approve the lease with the for the Apple equipment through the PEPPM cooperative program.
Is there a motion? Or questions? Are there questions before?
All right, I'll make that motion.
Excellent. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Jen, second by Amanda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you very much. And that brings us into the food service staffing increase request.
Okay. And once again, the popularity of the meal participation, both in the middle school and the high school, we are looking for an additional position for a general worker, which is 3.95 hours a day. Depending on their experience, that is the wage that would land, which is part of the contract. And again, both the demand, the participation rate for both lunch and breakfast, it would be helpful to have an additional employee to meet the student needs. And again, this funding comes through the school lunch revolving.
I was confused. Is this one person to span 2 schools or one for each school?
One for each.
Okay,
I
I was trying
apologize
to
if
figure out
that
how they
wasn't
were going to
clear.
run back and forth. But,
Right, no.
okay.
I had a question. So I know with the universal free lunch that we've been operating under for the past bit, there was some expectation that if that was going to go away, the demand would decrease. Is that?
So the tricky part is, right now, the free lunch is not being extended.
Right.
However, there is a push for it to be extended. And we may not know until
Okay.
day one of school,
Okay.
whether or not free lunch will be extended. You know, you've
Yeah.
probably seen there is a big political push
Yeah.
to extend it at least for one more year.
Yep.
So how much that participation may drop is unknown. One of the strategies with the high school, we have a mobile cart. So we're trying to just really separate the lines and separate where students can get access to food. But in order to operate that mobile cart, you need a dedicated employee for there. Middle school, and so that's at the high school.
Yep.
Middle school participation is just through the roof, and I think it will continue whether it's free or not. That those kids really do enjoy their lunch.
They like the food.
I guess I was asking in part because I thought maybe you had an inside track. I'm in support of making sure that we have the right staffing to provide the meals. So.
I wish I had an inside track. Desi literally has a letter if there is still free lunch and if there is not still free lunch for food service directors to mail out, but nobody knows which one to mail.
All right.
So I had that same question, but then I had one other thing just in anticipation. So if we hire this person, they're going to stay regardless of, I just maybe for the security of this person who we're hiring,
Right.
they're going to stay regardless of whether or not.
Well, what
We'll
we
keep them.
do see in this particular area is a lot of turnover.
Okay.
So we would hire this person, and if it does look as though there would be staffing decreases, which I don't think there will be, chances are it would be answered through attrition.
Okay. Okay.
I just think the number of students trying to get through the cafeterias in that short amount of time. I mean, if we can enhance the throughput with some more personnel, I think
Right.
this is great, whether it's free lunch or not. Even if demand eases a little bit, we still have so many kids
Right.
trying to get through. I just had a quick question. The revolving account, we had discussions about the revolving accounts earlier in the year, and I know that we've used some of that money for the budget. We're readjusting it after the pandemic and whatnot. The cafeteria balance is fairly high, and it looks fairly high compared to where we began the year. I'm not actually sure what the target normal is, but we will fund these 2 positions out of the revolving account for next year and then pull them into the operating budget after then, or do they stay in the revolving?
They always stay in the revolving. All the food service staff is always through
They
the
are.
revolving.
Okay.
So one thing I will say about the balance, we record the revenue fairly timely.
Okay.
But invoices take longer to get through.
Okay.
And my accounts payable person was on vacation, and when I tell you there was a stack of food service invoices this high, it's not an exaggeration. I actually gave them to someone else to input because we just can't keep up. That's
Okay.
another story.
That explains it, because it seemed a little higher than I expected, and then I knew you were looking to bring these folks on board, and I just wasn't sure what the
Right.
target.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
thank you.
there is a large warrant for food service that will be coming through once we plow through it.
Awesome.
So then I would seek a motion to approve the additional cafe general worker for both the high school and the middle school for the 2022 to 2023 year.
So moved.
Okay, Jen,
Second.
second by Leah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and that is moved. Thank you for bringing that forward. And that brings us then into the Marathon Edition contract. Does sort of feel like you're on the hot seat tonight.
I did say this was the Susan Rothermick show tonight.
Yeah.
Well, this is going to be the unfortunate part of the show.
This is going to be the unfortunate part of the show. So tonight, what I was hoping to bring to you was the general contractor bid for approval for the addition for the Marathon building. What we have run into is the bids went way over budget. So we have invited Colliers, our owner's project manager, and a few others to join the call. And Adam is kind enough with Colliers to have a presentation that we'll share to kind of walk through where we were. As you know, as a reminder, we went to town meeting, we asked for additional money, and here we are again, still not hitting that target. And you'll hear from Colliers, basically our cost estimators, the independent cost estimators, can't even keep up with what they're seeing, and really truly in construction is unprecedented. So I'm going to hand it over to Adam. So he is going to present. Is that going to come through on HCAM, or should I put the slides up myself?
I think you should.
Oh, do you have the slides?
I have the slides. Okay.
You got them on your TV?
Can he see the screen so he knows what to talk to?
Do you want me to move them
Is
a
he
little bit?
frozen?
Okay.
He looks.
Adam,
there he
so are you off mute?
Yep, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Beautifully.
Perfect.
Okay, great. So no need for me to share my screen, right?
Nope, so I have your slides up, right now, it just really is, your cover slide, and I'll hit right into your agenda slide.
Sure, go for it. Thank you very much. So again, my name's Adam D'Alessio. I'm with Colliers. We are the OPM for this project. So as Susan mentioned, we wanted better results than we got from the bids yesterday that came in. So I just wanted to run through a quick slideshow of where we started to kind of where we are today. So the agenda today, what I'm going to run through is the cost estimates during design, our budget analysis, the general contractor bid tabulation that came in yesterday. And then we have other municipal projects that came in over recent time that have been in over budget that we want to share with you as well. And then kind of what our next steps, bid strategies are.
Okay.
All right, so cost estimates during design. So the design is broken up really into schematic design, design development, and then construction documents. And at each phase, we like to go through, in this particular project, and we did two different estimates, one during design development and one during construction document phase. And those are done by two separate cost estimators. And then we come together as a group and we reconcile those two estimates to make sure that the scopes line up and that we're either on budget, over budget, and kind of see where we fall. But coming into this project, there was a budget already set of $2.7 million, which is about $388 a square foot. What we did is we went back to your recent high school edition, and we averaged the top 5 GC bids on that project. And then what we did is we escalated that number 15% to kind of get us through the midpoint of construction, which was about December of 2022 for this project. So that's where we came up with a total budget of the $3.1 million, bringing that square footage total up to about $445. So that's where we went back, or the town went back for additional funds at the town meeting for $695,000. And so we confirmed that number with our cost estimators. Everybody seemed to feel comfortable with it at the time. And that was in December of 21. So moving to February of 22, now we're in design development. We have the two cost estimators, as I just mentioned. We went through that process. We met. And we had the construction budget again of the 3.1 million now. Design development estimate came in at 3.2 million. So it jumped up a little bit, but not much, bringing that total square foot cost to about $465 a square foot. And so we felt comfortable with the budget that we had. We could still move some funds around, moving from the FF&E budget that we had and some other funds within the total project budget to supplement that small variance that we had in those two numbers. So we moved forward with the construction document phase of that. So the designers kept designing. In April, so just recently, we went through and did another round of estimates, two estimators. We met again, and those numbers came in at 3.5 million, about $500 a square foot. So what we did is, we can flip to the next slide here. So with that, what we were able to do, and I can explain it a little bit better in this budget analysis. So again, this was our original budget, the 3.2 million. During that SD phase, which is schematic design, it jumped up to 3.1 million. We had a furniture and fixture and equipment budget, which is your desks, everything to kind of fill the space, and your technology. We had a budget of 240,000. And our total project budget was 4,320,000, and that was including the 695,000 overage that was at spring meeting. So from there, as I mentioned, we went into the design development again, which brought the budget up to the 3.2 million. And what we did was as I mentioned, we supplemented some of the FF&E, and we supplemented that construction budget. And the process was that the FF&E was going to be supplemented through this project through an operating budget. So we felt comfortable, again, as I mentioned, moving forward into the design development. When we had our last round of estimates again, brought it up to 3.5, depleting our FF&E, but again, that was going to be supplemented through the operating budget, which brings us to what we actually received yesterday for our bids. So with that, the low bid came in at 3.9 million. Which depleted our funds to actually fund this project. So in order to do that, in order to supplement this, what we'd have to do, we'd want to bring our FF&E back up to the 240,000 that we were carrying originally. And we also have what's down here is a contingency budget. So this is for anything as you're going through construction that maybe it's unforeseen condition, something that the district will want to add. Just something that's not in the original project scope that comes up, you always have a contingency budget. So with this, we carried 5% of the construction, which is 5% of the construction cost, and then the owner's project contingency, 145,000, which is about 3% of all the soft costs. So that is a very comfortable budget that you want to have going into a project like this. And so that would bring the project up to $5.1 million with an overage of $853,000.
And Adam, I'll just interrupt because it's very small on the screen.
Oh, I apologize. Okay.
No, and that's fine. So what you see highlighted, kind of that bigger block in yellow, that's what he's referring to as that furniture, fixture, and equipment, which would be what we would actually outfit the classrooms. So we went from the original budget and just kind of kept playing around with that number to fatten up the actual construction number, thinking that, well, maybe we can just ask for that when we do our budget for the next round. So in the operating budget, we would be able to, we'd have the time, May town meeting, the budget passes, we buy the desks through the operating in July, we'd be able to outfit the classrooms. And we played around with contingencies, like Adam said, and that's the bottom number highlighted in yellow. So I know those are difficult to see, but those are the buckets that we kept kind of robbing from to push to that upper line, which is the construction line. As the construction line kept growing, we kept trying to rob other line items and push it up.
Correct.
So, and again, I know that's hard to see, but that's what that's showing you.
Thank you, Susan.
Can I ask a fast question before you move on to the next slide? So because I can't see it, so is the FF&E and the contingency exhausted
So
on here?
what we're, the last column is representative of where we are now. So with
Is
the.
there anything in it?
And with, so, you know, we've put the money back where it belongs.
Oh.
So because now we can't play around with the budget anymore and make these numbers work, we're putting back the money that should be in that budget. So the FF&E and the contingency now are back to being fully funded of what this project needs to move forward. So we're not
Correct.
robbing any other lines anymore. So based on the newest estimates for construction, we put all those other numbers back to where they belong.
Yeah, we want to make the project whole again, is our focus.
Do you have a sense of what's driving the overage? I'm sure the answer is everything, but is it more materials cost? Is it labor? Is it timing? Like if we shifted the timing of the project?
It is, I do have
Adam's gonna
some
speak to
additional
that.
information on
Okay.
that. So
Yeah.
it's a little bit of everything that you just said.
All right, so Adam, I'm on the general contractor bid tabulation slide.
Sure. So we got the bids in yesterday. So these are the bids that came through. So Mill City Construction was our low bid at 3.9 million. But we had several other bids that came in as well, and they were all pretty close. There wasn't anybody who was so far off that we thought maybe something was misaligned with the documents or anything like that. It was so close that we felt very comfortable with how the documents were presented and how the GCs read those documents. So like I mentioned, we had our last estimate 3.5, our overage is 4.9, or I'm sorry, 490,000. And so we did reach out to our cost estimators, and some of this information that we received back from them might answer that question. So on the town side, what we used AM Fogarty, who we've used multiple times in the past. They're a cost estimating company, just as the other companies as well. But this is all they do. They do construction cost estimating. So they know this stuff kind of inside and out, and they're even at a loss at this point. But anyways, I can just read from here because I know it's hard to see. So it says, this is from AM Fogarty. As we have seen for the past several months, construction pricing are rising at a dramatic pace. As an independent estimator, I find it very challenging to predict construction costs in this current market. I suspect the overage is due in large part to increased construction costs and fuel prices. I also believe delaying this project will only add to the construction costs. At present, we do not know when the construction prices will settle down and get back into previous levels. I wish I could give you a better forecast of the future, but I can't see construction costs lowering anytime in the near future. So that came from AM Fogarty, who's the estimator that we use quite a bit. On the architect side, they used Tarbell Construction Management, who they focus just on cost estimating as well. So what he had to say is, I've seen a sharp increase in steel, metal deck, cold rolled metal framing, and drywall. They can vary greatly over a small period of time, particularly on the smaller projects. There is a general uneasiness about the market right now with the interest rates rising sharply, gas prices rising to a record levels, and labor shortages leaving the contractors unsure of their costs. So to kind of answer your question, it is, what the estimators are seeing is, steel is a big one, metal decking, cold rolled metal framing is what you see, kind of metal studs that when you construct a building, and drywall. They're seeing these as just constantly increasing. And for these estimators to try and keep up with these, with gas prices now, as everybody's seeing, is affecting everybody, not just construction. So, it's hard to understand where these prices are going at this point and how they really can estimate what these are going to come in at. So they try and do their best. They carry as much escalation in their estimates, and they try and be as conservative as they can. But just with the market, how it is right now, it's super hard to predict. And then general contractors, they have the same thought. They don't want to get left signing a contract where then they start losing money. So they want to protect themselves as well. So it's a really difficult process at this point. Does that help with your question?
Thank you. Yes, it does.
Great.
All right, so this slide shows the other bid results that have been recent.
Yeah, so what we tried to do is put together a handful of projects. So we have some schools in here, and we have other municipal projects. So these are all, publicly funded projects that we go out. You're going through the bid process similar to what we just did with this project. So some of the ones I've highlighted here, this is the Worcester Doherty High School. It's a larger project, but it was a $239 million project, but it was over by 23 million. That was just this April. Ashland David Minus Elementary School, that was a $67 million project. That was over by 1.3, and that was just this April. Brooklyn High School expansion, that was a $6.6 million project. So more compared to our project, and that was over by 1.9 million. And that was just this past March. But there's other projects in here that are municipal projects. They're not schools, but they are other, types of buildings. And all these projects that are listed here are all coming in over budget. And so it's just a trend that we're seeing, that it's, by the time you actually do an estimate and go out to bid, the price is already, being increased again, and gas prices are going up. And, it just, like I said, it's just, we thought we were comfortable coming into it. We went back for some additional funding. And, we're still short.
All right, on to our strategies.
Yeah, so we were talking, and so there's a couple different strategies that we have here as far as moving forward. So the first strategy is to utilize the existing bids and have a special town meeting, or to utilize some other funding sources. So through the bidding documents, these bids from everybody have to be held until at least August 4th. And so we did have a conversation this morning with Mill City, who's the low bidder, and they have agreed to hold their price through the end of August. So they extended it a few weeks just so we can try to figure out what we're going to do here. So with this first strategy here, as I mentioned before, the project overage to supplement the construction, supplement the FF&E, and then bring the contingency back to where it needs to be. The total overage is $850,000. If we were to have a second strategy, it would be, we could reject all the bids that came through, and then we can push this to the Springtown meeting in 2023. And we went through and kind of looked at what additional costs would that bring. So it'd be about a 10% increase. And so what we did is we averaged out all the bids that were received and from the general contractors. And so we're looking at about $500,000 increase on the general bid itself. We have OPM and architectural fees. We'll have to go through and pre-qualify, rebid the project. It's about $60,000 plus a month. There's advertising fees for about $1,500. Posting the bid, collecting the bids is about $8,000. And then we'd have the additional cost estimating process to go through again, which is about $35,000 plus or minus. So with those tallied up, that's a subtotal of about $605,000. Plus you add in the project overage to supplement our budget again. That totals about just over $1.4 million if we were to push this off to the Springtown meeting.
So, one question. We have that Pulte Homes, the account that has the payments that came in from,
Yes,
right? And we've been very careful not to use that.
that's correct.
Do we have the ability to use some of that? Because it was meant for student enrollment issues, right?
That's correct. So that would be one of the potentials. In order to spend any of that money, you still need a special town meeting. So
Okay.
we would have to hold a special town meeting and ask to use money from that account.
Okay, I may be misremembering. We had this whole conversation last year about asking town meeting to allow us to spend, and we would hold it in reserve, and we wouldn't spend it if we didn't have to. Like, did we actually ask for that? Not at this town meeting, but the year before. I think it was
No,
like.
so I believe the committee had asked if there was anything, and I think the thought process at the time was around operating. Was there, to set aside money for operating in an account to be spent? And no, that was not asked. So
Okay.
at the May town meeting, we did not ask to pull out any money.
Can you just remind me from the point of signing a contract, when would the addition be completed? How long would it take, assuming that there was labor and materials and there were no other hiccups in supply chain and whatnot? How long would it be? It's a big assumption.
So the acceptance of a bid this evening, the timeline, the schedule would have occupancy for fall of '23. So it would be built all this winter
Yeah.
and for, the marathon students to be able to go in September. Having to delay even by a month for a special town meeting or any kind of delay, of course, we'd have to work with that general contractor to see if they can still meet that timeline. So that is part of, it's another challenge.
Yeah.
And we've already spoken to Ms. Dubois about this potential. She's been involved in these conversations, very somber conversations. I've also been in touch with the town already. So the thought would be that we would have a joint meeting with the select board. July 12th, I believe, is their next meeting, and just talk about strategies and a process for what this would be. If it was a special town meeting, they understand that we would have to hit the target of how long the general contractors will hold their bid. So we talked through a potential timeline to be able to hit a town meeting that would get us a signed contract before the end of August, if that's, the strategy that's decided between the boards with the select board. And, are there any other avenues, any other potential, avenues to fund this? So those conversations have begun. I've been working closely with Tim O'Leary. And so we will most likely 99% be having a joint meeting on July 12th with the select board and potentially other boards as well.
Is it possible to reach an agreement with the select board on July 12th? And did the timeline work and still have a special town meeting in August before the deadline?
Yes.
It-
Yeah,
that-
we walked
posting
through
times and
the
everything.
timeline from July 12th and having the timing to get to that special town meeting, so it does work.
And we have to have quorum in August at a
You'd
town
have
meeting.
to have quorum, so we'd have to really pound the school population to come to meet quorum.
Wow.
Talk about being stuck between a rock and a hard place, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the appetite of the community being asked for more money after they just got asked for money for this
Right.
is going to be a really hard thing. That's
Although,
why I was bringing up
if
the town.
we had the special town meeting and the consideration was to move money from
Yeah,
the
that's what I
host
was
community,
thinking.
that at least we wouldn't have to ask for,
Yeah, I
It would
think
be-
they would have more of an appetite.
would be an awfully big bake sale.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
If it didn't come from that fund, where would it come from? If it didn't come from the, like you're talking about the legacy fund, correct?
We'd basically be
That
taking
would
out
be-
a loan of some kind, right?
Well, if we are not accessing that fund,
Yeah.
then it would be a Prop 2.5 debt exclusion, which would mean a special town meeting and an election.
Ooh.
So it would be 2 votes. So the strategy most likely would be to
Yeah.
utilize that fund.
Yeah, make it as streamlined as possible.
Correct. And again, it does not go back to the taxpayers.
That's even better.
Right.
Well, and I would think adding if we had to add a special town election, I know there are time requirements between the meeting and the election that might push us beyond what the
Yeah.
Right.
August deadline would be.
Right.
And they're expensive. It adds to the cost of the
Yeah.
whole thing.
Right.
Yeah.
That's correct.
And our projections, our enrollment, I know you didn't have them tonight in your report, but the 2023 enrollment projections continue to grow at Marathon.
Yes, they do.
And we're already completely squeezed. So.
Yeah.
Yes,
we-
I'd be happy to speak to that.
I didn't know you were even there.
And when we moved into Marathon, we had 555 students pre-K to 1. We have 675 now. So when you think about that added 125 students, it's made a difference. Our flex space, we started using 2 years ago. We don't have a health room, we don't have an art room. Our family resource room, which some of you may have been at a meeting, a presentation, professional development. We used to hold new teacher orientation for the district. It was an adult learning space. This year it was a student space. Next year, that's a preschool classroom. That's upstairs. So we're gonna have 3-year-olds trying to get upstairs. They might all be going in the elevator at once because those are really big stairs for little legs, but we don't have another space for them. We have what is in the library, which was the teaching space. That will be a special education classroom. We have an ESOL teacher that will be teaching in a breakout space, which is a wonderful space in the hallway, but it's an open space, not really meant to be a classroom. We are tight and hurting. We are sharing space. I mean, the air conditioning's wonderfully. Thank goodness, or I think I'd have a mutiny on my hands. But I mean, we have like next year, I'm sharing my office with someone. We're flexible. We learned that from center school, but in terms of what the building was designed for and what we are at with this unprecedented enrollment, it's impacting our programming and our plans for the school. And it's not dipping.
Thank you for sharing.
And we're already playing catch up, right? Because when we decided to add the marathon classrooms, it was to meet the current enrollment that we had in the school at that moment.
Yes.
So-
In some ways, and I know Lauren can speak to this, we'll be doing the same. So you put classrooms on, but that will put your art teacher back in her art classroom.
For a minute.
Right, so it's not technically adding additional classes. We need to restore some of that programming space. So the art room will be an art room. The special education room will come out of the library. The preschool room will come out of the family resource room. Because that will make it work, but the family resource room, for example, that's not intended to be a classroom. It's a challenge. It doesn't have the same square footage. One wall is built-in shelves. One wall is, set up for an adult function with a refrigerator, a sink, adult size, not children. They're not going to be able to wash their hands necessarily at that sink in that room without a stool, for sure. So that addition helps us restore the space, and then we'll have a room to see which grade needs it the most, preschool K or 1. That's how tight we are.
Thank you.
I hate to ask this question. Such a happy topic, this whole thing. Modular classrooms.
I was thinking the same thing.
I mean,
I know.
have we had I mean, I hate to say it's
I
a
know.
beautiful building. We have a place to put an addition. We have an urgent need. And then we just interviewed an assistant superintendent candidate who talked about addressing diversification and growth through programming spaces and community spaces and all the things that we have now had to reappropriate for just everyday classrooms. And so I just am asking the question. I mean, is the need so urgent? Is there some other solution that maybe is less elegant but more serviceable?
So we've had a lot of discussions, even from all the way back when we were developing all of these estimates, and we had this conversation again today. Modular building, and Adam may be able to speak to this again better than I.
Sure.
Modular building is hitting the same cost impact. When we did the analysis way back, the cost to do modular was way above doing what's considered a stick built. So as these costs continue to rise, so does the cost of modulars. So we would actually be asking for even more money.
Even if we just lease?
Yeah, I think, Susan, it was roughly around 30% higher when we looked at these originally. And we did, again, talk with the estimators again. And as you mentioned, those costs have carried straight through with the cost of construction. And then even now, even trying to get the modular units might even be an issue as far as timing goes as well.
Yeah, I think, we had that little mini flood down in the middle school, and I had asked about modular classrooms to finish out the school year. And I think, the insurance adjuster was telling me they were about 8 months out to get leased units. like just ready to go, never mind trying to build something that was conducive to learning that needs to happen at Marathon School.
Crazy.
So,
Doesn't really save us any time.
No,
Or money.
or money.
Or money,
Yeah.
right.
Or
But
money.
a good question.
That's crazy.
So it seems like based on what you said that, at least for me, I'd be leaning towards option number one up there.
Right.
But I would say that to go back to the town and ask for over $750,000 is a big ask. So I feel like even though I can appreciate the desire to fully fund the project in its original format, I would probably take some of that FF&E and contingency and lower that number so that when we go in and we ask for more money, it's not that high. I mean, I know ask high and be happy with what you get, but I think we've already asked twice, so I'd be a little worried about going in for more unless you have a thought or a recommendation.
Well,
I mean, I
mean,
defer to your expertise, but
My recommendation would be to be using that school stabilization, the legacy farms money. So
to do the whole thing.
to do the whole thing. So what Dr. Kavanaugh and I have talked about in terms of future planning, when you go to ask for the Elmwood building, any improvements or changes that would come out of that feasibility study for the remaining of the campus, you would use potentially the rest of that legacy farm stabilization to, get those costs. Pull the modulars off of Elmwood, attach them where they need to be attached. That would save some money on whatever increased changes you would need to do. So this would just kind of tap into a little bit of what we're potentially saving for that next, that would be in addition to the Elmwood project.
Right.
So,
Right, that was
and again, using the legacy money, that is the intent of that funding, and it does not go back to the taxpayers. And the next time you go back to the taxpayers would be for the Elmwood project and that full campus, whatever that is.
Right.
And it builds capacity. It's exactly the intent that we had always articulated as a board to build capacity, not use it just while it away for operational costs if we can avoid it, which we haven't done. So I support your directional thinking of definitely number one. I'd say we'd ask for the whole thing, probably.
All right.
I mean, there is still a potential, that you could come in under budget. Some of these projects that we have bid, because keep in mind, the general contractors, rightfully so, are putting in their own contingencies.
Sure.
Because prices are so volatile. But we'll pay what is an actual price. So, when we're putting in a budget for FF&E, it may come in under, we may be able to offset some of it with the operating and cut down on what the actual. But to have the funding available to actually complete the project, I think is important. And then we look for ways to, maybe not try to spend the whole thing. And anything that we would not spend would then revert back to that stabilization account, which is how that is set up.
Okay.
So when we ask for money out and we don't spend it, it goes back in, so it doesn't disappear from your control.
Okay.
Can we know that we can get a date in August for a special town meeting to request this money? If we
Yes.
needed to? Okay.
Yeah, so
Because I see it's good till August 4th, but they'll extend it through the end of August if we tell them we're trying to get the money for them.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, so working with the town, the timeline will work
Okay, that's,
to be able to hit the end of August.
okay.
Okay. Thank you. So I guess from next steps from here would be I will be in communication with the select board chair to make sure we can do that July 12th date and then communicate that back to everybody here.
Do you have any more questions for Colliers or Ms. Dubois?
No, this is a very thorough, I appreciate all the information. Thank you.
My only question is, do we have to wait till the 12th? I mean, I know that's their next scheduled meeting. I'm just wondering if, even if we did it remotely,
Sure.
if we could do it sooner.
So I'll reach out to them and see what the availability for a day would be.
Thank you for
Thank you.
attending this evening.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you for
Have a
all
great
the
night.
work making this so transparent
Right.
and easy to follow. It's very appreciated.
Thank you, Lauren.
Take care. Have a good night. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
night. Thanks. Okay, so there is no motion on that,
There
but
is no motion.
thank you for bringing that all to us. So that brings us into items by consensus.
Okay, as superintendent, I recommend the school committee approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
Motion.
So moved. I'm sorry, you got it, Lee.
Motion by
I'll second
Leah,
it.
a second by Jen. All those in favor?
Aye.
And then at this time, I would seek a motion to enter into executive session to comply with or act under the authority of MGLC 30A21A3, specific to considering applicants for employment by a preliminary screening committee, because having the discussion in an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the school committee's bargaining position, and adjourning at the conclusion of the executive session.
So moved.
Motion by Amanda. Is there a
Second.
second by Holly? And we'll do a roll call, starting with you, Jen.
Yes.
Holly?
Yes.
Leah?
Aye.
Amanda?
Aye.
And I am also an aye, and we are adjourned into executive session at 8:13.